Hey everyone! Tonight we're drifting back to the very beginnings of human history, to Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, where the first cities rose from mud and reeds, and the first stories were carved into clay. This was no ordinary land, it was the cradle of civilization, where floods shaped kingdoms, where gods ruled from temple towers, and where memory itself was invented in the soft marks of cuneiform. Imagine standing on the banks of the Euphrates at dawn, the mist lifting from the water as farmers wade barefoot into the fields. Behind them, the walls of Uruk rise, sun-baked bricks stacked into eternity, and beyond them, the steps of a ziggurat stretch toward the sky. Priests carry offerings in baskets, merchants shout in crowded markets, and scribes bend over tablets, pressing wedges into wet clay that will outlast empires. But Mesopotamia was never just peace and plenty. It was a place of endless balance between flood and drought, war and trade, myth and memory. Kings ruled, but only at the mercy of the gods. Empires rose only to crumble into sand, and still, the rivers kept flowing, carrying with them the echoes of stories we can still hear today. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy these quiet journeys into the past. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It is always wonderful to see how far this little circle of night listeners reaches. Now close your eyes, imagine the torchlight flickering on clay walls, the soft sound of reeds in the wind, and let's drift together into the long, ancient dream of Mesopotamia, where civilization itself first learned to breathe. The Fertile Crescent awakens. Long before the grandeur of pharaohs, the might of Rome, or the whispered myths of distant empires, there was a land cradled between two great rivers. This was Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, a crescent of fertile earth arcing through what is now modern-day Iraq, a place where the very forces of nature conspired to birth civilization. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of damp earth, rich river silt, and the pungent aroma of countless reeds stretching to the horizon under an immense, unblinking sun. This was where the story of humanity's settled existence, of its first grand experiments in community and control, truly began. The Tigris and the Euphrates. Two arteries of life born high in the distant mountains, carving their relentless paths through arid lands, carrying the vital gift of water and a ceaseless bounty of fertile silt. Their annual floods, a dance of destruction and renewal, were the defining rhythm of this ancient world. For months, the land might bake under a fierce sun, the earth cracking, thirsting. Then, without warning, the rivers would swell, their waters churning, brown with the rich sediment, overflowing their banks, transforming the plains into a vast, shallow inland sea. This was not always a gentle inundation. It could be a terrifying deluge, sweeping away fragile settlements, erasing the efforts of man in a single, watery stroke. But with the floods came a profound promise. As the waters receded, they left behind a glistening layer of incredibly fertile topsoil, renewed and enriched, ready to receive the seed. This was the magic of the rivers, the natural endowment that drew the first hesitant steps of nomadic hunter-gatherers towards a new way of life. Hear the gentle lapping of the water against the riverbanks, the soft rush of currents, the distant, almost imperceptible sound of silt settling, building the very land itself. The landscape was one of stark contrasts, endless, flat plains, shimmering under the fierce sun, bordered by dense thickets of towering reeds along the riverbanks. These reeds, abundant and resilient, were more than just plant life. They were the first building blocks of human ingenuity. Their strong, flexible stalks were woven into mats for shelter, crafted into baskets for carrying, used to fashion rudimentary boats for navigating the rivers. They offered shade, camouflage, and the raw material for a life slowly learning to be sedentary. The rustle of these reeds in the river winds, a soft, hypnotic whisper, was the constant soundtrack to these earliest human experiments. Picture the small, scattered groups of people, their skin tanned by the relentless sun, their eyes keen from a lifetime of observation. They had followed the migrations of game, harvested wild grains from the riverbanks, and fished in the abundant waters. But the cycles of the rivers, the consistent return of the fertile silt, hinted at a deeper possibility. A life less beholden to constant movement, a life rooted in a single, generous patch of earth. And so, slowly, tentatively, they began to experiment. They dug shallow channels to guide the floodwaters more deliberately, to extend their reach to new plots of land. They planted the wild grains, barley and wheat, not just relying on chance, but on deliberate cultivation. This was the first spark of human memory transforming into a collective enterprise, the first step towards harnessing nature's power rather than simply reacting to it. The challenges were immense, the unpredictable nature of the floods. Too little water meant drought and starvation, too much meant devastating destruction. The constant battle against wild animals drawn to the fertile lands, the endless labor of irrigation, of building and maintaining canals, of taming the wild forces of the rivers. But the rewards were equally profound, a surplus of food, a stability that allowed for larger gatherings, for specialized tasks, for the slow, hesitant emergence of something utterly new. The air, as twilight descended, would cool quickly, bringing with it the pervasive scent of damp earth and the smoke from crude cooking fires, mingling with the rich, earthy aroma of the river. Moonlight, a pale, indifferent eye, would cast long, shifting shadows across the plains, illuminating the first, fragile outlines of permanent fields, the nascent efforts of communities learning to read the language of the rivers, floods, reeds, and the first fields that birthed civilization. The Fertile Crescent awakened as a crucible of human ingenuity, a land where the constant interplay of elemental forces and human will laid the foundations for all that was to come. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris, and Euphrates weaving together myth and mudbrick, tracing the first hesitant steps of humanity towards an enduring, complex destiny. The first cities, from the scattered agricultural settlements clinging to the life-giving rivers, a profound transformation began, a leap forward in human organization that would define civilization itself. This was the birth of the first cities, colossal experiments in collective living, where thousands of people, once bound by kinship, were now united by shared purpose, intricate irrigation systems, and a burgeoning sense of civic identity. Uruk, Ur, and Eridu. These were not just collections of dwellings. They were where mudbrick met eternity, where the first sparks of human memory were forged into enduring urban landscapes rising from the fertile plains, like promises whispered to the gods. Imagine the air, no longer just thick with the scent of damp earth and reeds, but heavy with the mingled aromas of countless cooking fires, bustling marketplaces, and the faint, underlying tang of human presence. The sounds were no longer just the rustle of reeds or the distant lowing of cattle. They included the rhythmic clang of hammers, the murmur of thousands of voices, the shouted commands of overseers, and the incessant hum of construction. Moonlight over nascent ziggurats, their towering mudbrick forms catching the pale light, illuminated a world fundamentally changed. Uruk, perhaps the most famous, grew to encompass a population of tens of thousands, sprawling across vast acres. Its walls, built from millions of sun-baked mud bricks, stood as monumental symbols of human collective labor and nascent power, offering protection from both the unpredictable floods and hostile neighbors. Within these walls, a complex society began to emerge, far beyond the simple farming village. Listen to the rhythmic slap of bare feet on packed earth streets, the shouts of workmen building new temples, the distant, almost ceremonial drumming from temple courts. Hear the quiet murmur of priests attending to rituals, the soft rustle of early written accounts on clay tablets. See the intricate network of irrigation canals, a sprawling testament to communal effort, branching out from the rivers like veins, bringing life to the surrounding fields. These early cities were dominated by their temples, colossal structures dedicated to the city's patron deity. In Uruk, the towering ziggurats of Iana, goddess Inanna, and Anu, sky god, rose dramatically from the flat plain, massive stepped pyramids built of mud brick, their terraces green with trees, their summits reaching for the heavens. These were not just places of worship, but economic powerhouses acting as central granaries, workshops, and administrative hubs, organizing the vast agricultural surplus and managing the complex irrigation systems. Eridu, often considered the earliest city, was believed to have been founded by the gods themselves, rising from the primordial waters of the Apsu. Its mythical origins reflected the deep spiritual connection the Sumerians felt to their environment and their deities. Another great city, would later become famous for its royal tombs, revealing an astonishing wealth and a sophisticated understanding of art and craftsmanship. The growth of these cities brought with it unprecedented social complexity. A rigid hierarchy began to form. Priests, kings or city governors, scribes, artisans, merchants, farmers, and laborers. Each had their role, their duties, their place within the vast, interconnected urban organism. Specialization of labor became possible, leading to innovations in craft, art, and technology. The challenges were immense, managing such large populations, dealing with waste, ensuring a constant food supply, defending against rivals. These were new problems, demanding new solutions. The rivers, while life-giving, remained unpredictable, capable of sudden, devastating floods that could erase entire sections of the city. Uruk, Ur, and Eridu, where mud brick met eternity. The first cities were a profound, revolutionary step in human history, transforming scattered huts into monumental urban centers. They were a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick walls, charting the first, audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex civilizations. Kings and priests. As the first cities of Mesopotamia rose from the fertile plains, transforming simple settlements into complex urban centers, a fundamental question of power emerged. Who would guide these burgeoning societies? In this nascent civilization, where survival hinged on both divine favor and pragmatic leadership, power was balanced between temple and throne, sacred and earthly. This delicate, often contentious interplay between kings and priests defined the earliest political and spiritual landscape of Sumer, shaping its laws, its rituals, and its enduring legacy. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of burning incense from grand ziggurats, mingled with the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil and the subtle tang of human presence. The sounds were no longer just the hum of construction. They included the solemn chanting of priests in temple courts, the distant rhythmic beat of drums, and the authoritative pronouncements of rulers in newly established palaces. Moonlight over towering ziggurats and burgeoning palace complexes illuminated a world grappling with the very nature of governance. In the earliest Sumerian city-states, the temple, dedicated to the city's patron deity, was often the paramount institution. The high priest, or Ensi, was seen as the earthly representative of the gods, responsible for ensuring divine favor through elaborate rituals, sacrifices, and strict adherence to religious law. The temple controlled vast tracts of land, managed the intricate irrigation systems, and oversaw the collection and redistribution of agricultural surplus, effectively acting as the central economic and administrative hub of the city. Listen to the low murmur of prayers in temple courts, the rhythmic splashing of lustral water, the careful intonation of sacred texts. Hear the precise commands of priests directing the work of thousands of laborers in the temple workshops, or overseeing the vast granaries filled with barley and wheat. See the impressive ziggurats, towering stepped pyramids of mud brick rising dramatically from the flat plain, their summits reaching for the heavens, a constant, visible reminder of divine authority. But as cities grew and conflicts between them became more frequent, a new form of leadership emerged, the Lugal, or great man, the king. Initially, this might have been a temporary war leader chosen for his military prowess in times of crisis. However, over time, the Lugal's power became permanent and hereditary, establishing a secular authority distinct from, though often still deeply intertwined with, the temple. The relationship between king and priest was one of essential interdependence, but also potential tension. The king derived his legitimacy from the gods, often claiming to be divinely appointed or favored, and his primary duty was to protect the city, ensure justice, and maintain the prosperity of the land. He built palaces, led armies, and issued laws, but he still needed the priests to interpret divine will, perform essential rituals, and manage the complex religious economy that formed the backbone of societal order. The priests, in turn, needed the king's secular power to protect the city and its sacred institutions from external threats, and to enforce the religious laws that maintained social cohesion. They held immense spiritual authority, influencing public opinion, and, through their control of resources, exerting significant economic leverage. The struggle for ultimate authority, whether the divine power of the temple or the earthly power of the throne, often shaped the political landscape of Sumerian cities. Sometimes a powerful king would assert dominance over the priesthood. Other times the priestly class would hold sway, ensuring religious law dictated all aspects of civic life. This dynamic tension created a complex, nuanced system of governance unique to its time. Power balanced between temple and throne, sacred and earthly. Kings and priests were the twin pillars upon which the first cities of Mesopotamia were built. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick walls, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of complex societies, where the divine and the temporal inextricably shaped the fate of forgotten cities. Writing in clay. As the first cities of Mesopotamia swelled with thousands of inhabitants, managing the complexities of their burgeoning societies, the vast agricultural surplus, intricate trade networks, detailed temple inventories, and nascent legal systems demanded something more permanent than memory or oral tradition. It was out of this profound administrative necessity that one of humanity's most revolutionary inventions emerged: writing. Cuneiform, literally wedge-shaped, would scratch the first records of trade, prayers, and law onto humble clay tablets, preserving the earliest whispers of human memory and fundamentally altering the course of civilization. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of damp earth and the subtle aroma of clay mingled with the wood smoke from hearth fires and the distant murmur of city life. The sounds were no longer just the clamour of markets or the solemn chanting of priests. They included the rhythmic click of a reed stylus against soft clay, the focused breathing of scribes, and the soft rustle of countless drying tablets. Torches flickering on clay tablets illuminated the painstaking efforts to capture thought and information. The earliest forms of writing, emerging in Sumer around 3400 BCE, were pictographic, simple drawings representing objects or ideas. But as the need for more efficient record-keeping grew, these pictograms evolved. Scribes, the first true intellectuals of Mesopotamia, began to use wedge-shaped marks, impressed into soft clay tablets with a blunt reed stylus, a cuneiform stylus. This revolutionary system, known as cuneiform, allowed for the precise recording of complex information. Listen to the focused, rhythmic click of the reed stylus as it pressed into the pliable clay, each wedge-shaped mark a deliberate act of creation. Hear the low murmur of scribes perhaps dictating or verifying figures, their voices hushed in the quiet intensity of their work. See the hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of clay tablets, stacked meticulously in temple archives or palace libraries, each one a fragment of recorded history, waiting to be read. The primary impetus for writing was not poetry or grand narratives, but administrative and economic necessity. Cuneiform was first used to record temple inventories, lists of barley, sheep, and other offerings. It tracked trade transactions, tallied harvests, and documented the allocation of labor for vast construction projects. These mundane records, essential for managing the complex economy of the city-states, represent the very earliest sustained bursts of human memory. But writing quickly expanded beyond mere accounting. It captured the intricate laws issued by kings like the famous Code of Hammurabi, ensuring justice, however harsh, and order. It preserved the solemn prayers offered to the gods, the complex rituals performed in towering ziggurats, and the myths and legends that explained their world, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. It even allowed for the first forms of correspondence, letters carried by messengers across the river kingdoms. The scribes were a privileged and powerful class, their literacy a rare and highly valued skill. They underwent rigorous training, mastering hundreds of complex cuneiform signs, spending years copying texts and learning arithmetic. Their pens, in a sense, held the keys to knowledge, to power, to the very fabric of society. The clay tablets themselves were a testament to the ingenuity of the Sumerians. Readily available, easy to work with when wet, and incredibly durable when dried in the sun or baked in kilns, they provided a permanent, robust medium for preserving information, destined to endure for millennia, waiting for rediscovery. Cuneiform scratches the first records of trade, prayers, and law. Writing in clay was a profound, revolutionary invention, transforming ephemeral thought into enduring record, fundamentally altering how humans organized their societies, preserved their knowledge, and understood their past. It was a slow river of memory flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, tracing the first audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of complex civilizations and laying the foundation for all future written history. The gods of the rivers. In Mesopotamia, a land perpetually shaped by the unpredictable dance of the Tigris and Euphrates, life was utterly dependent on forces beyond human control. The capricious floods, the searing sun, the bounty of the earth. In such a precarious existence, the divine was not an abstract concept, but an immediate, pervasive reality. The gods of the rivers were a vast, complex pantheon, led by powerful deities like Anu, Enlil, and Inanna, their whims believed to rule every aspect of life and flood, demanding constant appeasement, shaping every ritual, and defining the very cosmology of Sumerian existence. Imagine the air thick with the sweet, cloying scent of burning incense, the pungent aroma of sacrificial meat, and the rich, complex perfumes of rare oils poured onto altars. The sounds were no longer just the rhythmic click of styluses on clay, They included the solemn chanting of priests in temple courts, the distant beat of drums during sacred festivals, and the low murmur of desperate prayers rising from humble homes. Moonlight over towering ziggurats, their summits reaching for the heavens, illuminated the intricate, ever-present relationship between humanity and the divine. At the apex of the Sumerian pantheon stood Anu, the sky god, distant and majestic, the father of all deities. His power was immense, though often remote, governing the cosmic order. Below him, and perhaps more directly involved in earthly affairs, was Enlil, god of wind, air, and storms, a powerful and often terrifying deity whose pronouncements could bring devastating floods or life-giving rains. His temper was feared, his favor desperately sought. Listen to the low, rhythmic chanting of priests, their voices echoing through vast temple halls as they performed elaborate, daily rituals to appease these powerful gods. Hear the desperate pleas of farmers, their voices lifted to the sky, begging Enlil for a moderate flood, for a bountiful harvest, for protection from the capricious forces of nature. See the countless clay figurines and amulets, crude yet heartfelt, depicting lesser deities or protective spirits placed in homes for daily blessings. But perhaps the most beloved and feared goddess was Inanna, later Ishtar in Akkad and Babylon, the goddess of love, fertility, and warfare. Her contradictory nature, both gentle bringer of life and fierce warrior, reflected the complex realities of Mesopotamian existence. Her temples were vibrant centers of worship, her cult often involving elaborate festivals, processions, and sacred prostitution. She embodied the life-giving power of the earth and the passionate, destructive forces of human emotion. Each city-state also had its own patron deity, whose well-being was inextricably linked to the city's prosperity. Nanna, the moon god, for Ur; Utu, the sun god, for Sippar; Enki, god of water and wisdom, for Eridu. These gods were believed to physically reside in the city as towering ziggurat, receiving daily offerings and communicating their will through priestly interpretations of omens and dreams. Roman religion was less about dogma and more about ritual, about maintaining the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods, through meticulous observance of rites and offerings. If the gods were properly honored, they would, in turn, bless Rome with victory, good harvests, and stability. This pragmatic approach allowed Rome to easily incorporate the gods of conquered peoples into its own pantheon, building temples to Egyptian deities like Isis, or to local Celtic gods, seeing them as different manifestations of universal divine power. The relationship between humans and the gods was one of subservience and fear. Humans were created to serve the gods, to provide them with food and comfort, to ensure their good mood. A god's anger could bring devastating floods, famine, or military defeat. Life was a constant negotiation, a desperate effort to understand and appease the powerful, often capricious forces that ruled their world. Anu, Enlil, Inanna, and the pantheon that ruled life and flood. The gods of the rivers were a pervasive, fundamental force shaping every aspect of Sumerian existence, from the grandest imperial procession to the humblest household prayer. It was a slow river of memory flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick walls, charting the earliest, audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of complex societies where the divine and the temporal inextricably shaped the fate of forgotten cities. This profound cosmology, born of their environment, defined the very essence of Mesopotamia. The Epic of Gilgamesh. In the ancient mud-brick cities of Sumer, where the first kings asserted their earthly power, and the priests mediated with a formidable pantheon, one legend stands as a towering testament to human aspiration, fear, and the enduring quest for meaning. This was the Epic of Gilgamesh, a king's restless search for immortality that became the world's oldest story inscribed on clay tablets, its verses whispering across millennia, exploring themes of friendship, mortality, and the raw, unyielding nature of existence itself. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of damp earth and the subtle aroma of clay tablets, mingled with the wood smoke from hearth fires and the distant murmur of city life. The sounds were no longer just the hum of daily toil. They included the low, hypnotic chant of a storyteller in a lamplit courtyard, the rustle of scribes meticulously copying verses, and the rhythmic beat of drums accompanying the recitation of ancient tales. Moonlight over ancient ziggurats illuminated the timeless human quest for meaning. Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, was a figure of immense strength, beauty, and hubris. Said to be 2/3 god and 1/3 man, his early rule was marked by tyranny, his boundless energy and pride overwhelming the people of Uruk. They cried out to the gods for help, and in response, the gods created Enkidu, a wild man, a force of nature, destined to challenge Gilgamesh. Listen to the low, resonant voice of the storyteller describing the epic battle between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, a titanic struggle that ultimately ended in a profound, unexpected friendship. Hear the murmur of the audience, mesmerized by the tale of two formidable figures, once rivals, now brothers in arms, embarking on grand adventures together, battling fearsome monsters like Humbaba, guardian of the cedar forest. The central turning point of the epic, and its deepest lesson, came with the death of Enkidu. Struck down by the gods for their hubris and defiance, Enkidu's death plunged Gilgamesh into a profound existential despair. Confronted with the harsh reality of mortality, of the inevitable decay of even the strongest body, Gilgamesh became terrified of his own impending death. Driven by this overwhelming fear, Gilgamesh embarked on a perilous quest for immortality. He sought out Utnapishtim, the only mortal survivor of the Great Flood, a man to whom the gods had granted eternal life. His journey was arduous, taking him across the waters of death through unimaginable perils, his determination fueled by a desperate, insatiable yearning to escape his human fate. See Gilgamesh traversing desolate landscapes, battling scorpion men, crossing the treacherous cosmic ocean, his face etched with weariness and desperate hope. See him listening to Utnapishtim's tale of the Great Flood, a chilling precursor to other ancient deluge myths, revealing the gods' capricious power and humanity's inherent fragility. Ultimately, Gilgamesh failed to gain immortality. He was offered a plant that could restore youth, but even that was stolen by a serpent. He returned to Uruk, a broken man, but a wiser one. His quest, though outwardly a failure, led to a profound realization. True immortality lay not in escaping death, but in the enduring legacy of his deeds, in the magnificent walls he built for Uruk, and in the wisdom he had gained from his journey. A king's restless search for immortality becomes the world's oldest story. The Epic of Gilgamesh was more than just a tale. It was a profound exploration of fundamental human questions, inscribed in clay, passed down through generations, shaping the spiritual and philosophical landscape of ancient Mesopotamia. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mudbrick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex narratives that still resonate with humanity today. Sargon of Akkad. For centuries, the Sumerian city-states had flourished along the Tigris and Euphrates, vibrant but often warring entities, each fiercely independent, dedicated to its own patron god. But this fragmented landscape was destined to be profoundly reshaped by the ambition and genius of a single man. This was Sargon of Akkad, a figure born of humble, even mythical birth, who rose from obscurity to forge the world's first true empire, uniting Sumer and Akkad under his formidable will, transforming the political landscape of Mesopotamia forever. Imagine the air no longer confined to the individual hum of city-states, but charged with the energy of a vast, centralized power, the scent of conquest and new administration. The sounds were no longer just the clash of rival city armies. They included the disciplined march of Sargon's legions, the authoritative pronouncements of a single ruler, and the distant rhythmic beat of drums announcing imperial might. Moonlight over burgeoning imperial cities, their mud-brick walls now encompassing a vast dominion, illuminated a new era of centralized power. Sargon's origins were shrouded in legend, perhaps deliberately crafted to bolster his divine right to rule. He was said to have been a foundling, set adrift in a basket on the Euphrates, discovered and raised by a gardener, a mythical trope that echoed in later tales of Moses and Cyrus. From these humble beginnings he rose through the ranks, eventually seizing power in the city of Kish, strategically positioned to dominate both Sumer and the Semitic-speaking lands to the north. Listen to the rhythmic tramp of Sargon's soldiers, their bronze-tipped spears glinting, their discipline unmatched by the older, more localized city armies. Hear the fervent speeches of Sargon himself, a charismatic and ruthless leader, inspiring loyalty and fear in equal measure. See the vast plains of Mesopotamia, once a patchwork of independent city-states, now slowly, inexorably, falling under the dominion of a single, powerful will. His military campaigns were relentless and brilliantly executed. Sargon, a master strategist, systematically conquered the Sumerian city-states one by one, unifying them under his rule. He then turned his attention north, establishing his capital at Akkad, a city whose exact location remains lost to history, but whose name would become synonymous with his immense power. This was not merely conquest, it was the creation of a vast centralized empire, extending from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Sargon's empire was a monumental achievement, establishing new administrative practices, appointing loyal governors, often Akkadian, displacing Sumerian rulers, and implementing a unified system of weights and measures. Akkadian, a Semitic language, began to rise in prominence, blending with the older Sumerian. This was the birth of the concept of empire, a single ruler controlling diverse peoples and territories, a political structure that would echo through history. The prosperity of the Akkadian Empire was immense, fueled by tribute from conquered lands and secure trade routes stretching far beyond Mesopotamia. Art flourished, depicting Sargon and his successors as formidable, divinely sanctioned rulers, their images radiating strength and absolute authority. The rise of the First Empire under a man of humble birth, Sargon of Akkad, was a profound, revolutionary figure, transforming the fragmented political landscape of Mesopotamia forever. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the earliest, audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex political structures and laying the foundation for all future empires that would rise and fall across the world. Naram Sin and the curse, Sargon of Akkad, had forged the world's first empire, uniting Mesopotamia under a single, formidable will. His grandson, Naram Sin, inherited this vast dominion, and under his ambitious rule, Akkad reached its zenith. He was a brilliant general, an effective administrator, and a powerful king who famously declared himself divine, taking the unprecedented title King of the Four Quarters of the World, a boast that profoundly challenged the ancient Sumerian cosmology. But his reign, marked by immense victory and profound hubris, was destined to invite the wrath of the gods, culminating in a devastating curse that would shatter his empire and serve as a chilling cautionary tale for millennia. Imagine the air, once thick with the scent of imperial conquest and prosperity, now heavy with an unsettling stillness, an underlying current of divine displeasure. The sounds were no longer the triumphant march of Akkad's legions. They were the mournful whispers of priests, the desperate cries of a starving populace, and the ominous silence of abandoned cities. Moonlight over crumbling ziggurats and desolate palace complexes illuminated a world grappling with the terrifying consequences of divine wrath. Naram-Sin was a figure of immense capability and unshakable self-belief. His military campaigns were spectacularly successful, extending Akkad's dominion even further than Sargon, crushing rebellions and asserting Akkad's power over distant lands. The famous victory stele of Naram-Sin depicts him as a godlike figure, scaling a mountain over his vanquished enemies, wearing a horned helmet, traditionally reserved for deities. This was a king who saw himself as more than mortal. Listen to the triumphant shouts of Akkad's legions under Naram-Sin, their imperial standards emblazoned with symbols of a powerful, centralized state. Hear the authoritative pronouncements of Naram-Sin himself, declaring his divine status, his absolute authority over the entire known world. See the magnificent artistic and architectural achievements of the Akkadian Empire, reflecting its immense wealth and the powerful persona of its ruler. But Naram-Sin's hubris, his claim to divinity, and particularly his fateful decision to sack the revered Ekur temple of Enlil, the chief god of the Sumerian pantheon, in Nippur, were seen as a profound violation of cosmic order. The Ekur was not just a temple, it was believed to be the bond of heaven and earth, Enlil's sacred dwelling. To desecrate it was an unthinkable act, a direct challenge to the most powerful gods. The Curse of Akkad, a later Sumerian epic poem, vividly describes the divine retribution. Enlil, enraged by Naram-Sin's impiety, summoned the Gutians, a barbaric people from the Zagros Mountains, a people who know no inhibitions, to devastate Akkad. The poem describes them as a force of nature, descending upon Mesopotamia like a plague, destroying cities, cutting off trade routes, and bringing widespread famine. See the vast fields, once fertile, now lying desolate, ravaged by drought, and neglected by an empire in disarray. See the trade routes, once bustling with caravans, now silent, cut off by the Gutian invaders. See the magnificent cities of Akkad, their mud brick walls crumbling, their people starving, their once proud empire dissolving into chaos. Naram-Sin's reign, though initially glorious, thus ended in tragedy. The Akkadian Empire, the world's first, collapsed under a combination of internal revolts, economic instability, environmental factors — a severe drought is thought to have played a major role — and the relentless Gutian invasions. The curse, whether literal or symbolic, became etched into the memory of Mesopotamia, a chilling lesson about the limits of human power and the dangers of offending the gods. Victory, hubris, and the gods' wrath upon Akkad, Naram-Sin, and the curse marked the dramatic, tragic end of the Akkadian Empire, a profound object lesson in the precarious balance between human ambition and divine will. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mudbrick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex narratives that still resonate with humanity today, a chilling reminder of the ultimate fragility of even the mightiest empires. Daily life in summer. Beyond the towering ziggurats and the grand pronouncements of kings, beyond the epic quests of Gilgamesh and the imperial ambitions of Sargon, lay the enduring reality of daily life for the vast majority of people in ancient Sumer. Their existence was a ceaseless cycle of labor, defined by the unforgiving rhythms of the rivers and the soil. From barley bread to beer, from the rhythmic weaving of textiles to the harsh demands of war. This was the unwritten, unseen, but utterly vital rhythm of ordinary existence that formed the bedrock of the world's first civilization. Imagine the air, thick with the earthy scent of mud brick, the comforting aroma of baking bread, and the subtle tang of brewing beer. The sounds were no longer the clash of empires, but the low murmur of voices in bustling marketplaces, the rhythmic grind of a quernstone, the distant bleating of sheep, and the contented gurgle of water flowing through irrigation canals. Moonlight over humble mud-brick dwellings, their flat roofs serving as sleeping quarters in the summer, illuminated a world of ceaseless, necessary toil. The foundation of Sumerian life was agriculture, specifically the cultivation of barley and, to a lesser extent, wheat. Farmers, the vast majority of the population, toiled under the fierce Mesopotamian sun, digging and maintaining the intricate network of irrigation canals, ploughing their fields with ox-drawn ploughs, and sowing their precious seeds. Their lives were utterly dependent on the annual flood of the Tigris and Euphrates, praying for a moderate inundation that would renew the soil without destroying their homes. Listen to the rhythmic splash of water in the canals, the lowing of oxen, the shouts of farmers directing their labor. Hear the constant hum of a bustling community, the cries of vendors in the market, the distant clang of a coppersmith's hammer, the chatter of women at the communal well. See the vast fields stretching out from the city walls, a patchwork of green and gold, meticulously managed to yield the life-giving harvest. Barley bread was the staple of their diet, a dense, coarse loaf, often supplemented by onions, lentils, dates, and fish from the rivers. Beer, brewed from barley, was not just an alcoholic beverage, but a vital source of calories and safer hydration than untreated water, consumed by men, women, and children alike. Their diet was simple but robust, ensuring enough energy for their relentless labor. Weaving was another essential industry, primarily undertaken by women in their homes. Flax was grown for linen, and sheep provided wool. With simple looms, they produced the coarse textiles for clothing, simple tunics and cloaks, and for the mats and coverings that furnished their mud-brick homes. The rhythmic thump of the loom, the rustle of fibers, was a constant backdrop to domestic life. Sumerian society, though hierarchical, possessed a vibrant legal system. Even ordinary citizens could appeal to judges recorded on clay tablets, ensuring a degree of order and justice. While warfare between city-states was frequent, interrupting these daily rhythms with the brutal demands of soldiering, much of life revolved around communal work, religious festivals, and the raising of families. Houses were typically built of mud brick, simple rectangular structures with flat roofs, often clustered along narrow, winding streets. Within these homes, life was intimate, communal, and profoundly practical, centered around the hearth and the needs of the extended family. From barley bread to beer, weaving to war, the rhythm of ordinary existence in Sumer was a profound, ceaseless cycle of labor, ingenuity, and profound reliance on the bounty of the rivers. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud-brick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex civilizations built upon the quiet, persistent toil of its everyday people. The fall of Sumer. For centuries, the Sumerian city-states had given birth to civilization, fostering writing, urbanism, law, and complex religious systems. They had witnessed the rise and fall of Akkad, the world's first empire. But like all civilizations, Sumer was not eternal. Its decline was a slow, agonizing process culminating in a series of devastating invasions, prolonged droughts, and the inexorable fading of the world's first cities, leaving behind only the haunting echo of their once vibrant existence, buried beneath centuries of silence and sand. Imagine the air, no longer thick with the proud hum of urban life, but heavy with the dust of crumbling mud brick, the acrid scent of abandoned hearths, and the subtle tang of despair. The sounds were no longer the murmur of bustling markets or the solemn chanting of priests. They included the guttural shouts of foreign invaders, the desperate cries of a starving populace, and the eerie, profound silence of cities emptying out. Moonlight over desolate ziggurats and crumbling city walls illuminated a world in its death throes, a civilization slowly receding into the dust. After the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, Sumer experienced a brief resurgence known as the Neo-Sumerian, or Third Period, characterized by a renewed emphasis on Sumerian language and culture, and the building of magnificent structures like the Great Ziggurat of Ur. But this revival was short-lived, a final, brilliant flicker before the long night. Listen to the mournful lamentation sung in the temples as the priests and people struggled to comprehend the mounting misfortunes. Hear the distant, terrifying shouts of the Elamite invaders from the east, their armies sweeping across the plains, burning cities, carrying off treasures. See the vast irrigation canals, once the lifeblood of Sumer, now choked with silt, neglected, their intricate network collapsing, transforming fertile lands into arid wastes. The primary catalysts for Sumer's final fall were a combination of internal weaknesses, external invasions, and devastating environmental factors. The Amorites, a Semitic-speaking people from the west, migrated into Mesopotamia, gradually infiltrating and eventually dominating many Sumerian cities. Simultaneously, the Elamites, fierce rivals from the east, launched devastating attacks, culminating in the sack of Ur, the last great Sumerian capital, around 2004 BCE. But even more insidious was the profound environmental decline. Prolonged droughts, likely exacerbated by climate change, combined with centuries of intensive irrigation that had led to the salinization of the soil, slowly rendered vast tracts of once fertile land unproductive. The life-giving rivers, once a source of boundless bounty, now contributed to the slow poisoning of the land. The urban centers, once teeming with tens of thousands of people, began to shrink. Populations dispersed, fleeing starvation or invasion, seeking refuge in smaller, more sustainable settlements, or simply perishing in the relentless struggle for survival. The intricate social and economic structures, so carefully built over millennia, fractured under the immense pressure. The Sumerian language, which had given birth to writing and the world's first literature, slowly faded from spoken use, replaced by Akkadian and other Semitic tongues. It remained a language of scholarly and religious texts, preserved by scribes, but its living voice was silenced. Invasions, droughts, and the fading of the world's first cities. The fall of Sumer was not a sudden cataclysm, but a long, agonizing process of decline, a poignant testament to the fragility of even the most groundbreaking civilizations. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mudbrick, charting the gradual retreat of humanity from its earliest urban experiments, leaving behind only the haunting echo of forgotten cities buried beneath centuries of silence and sand, waiting for a distant rediscovery. The rise of Babylon. With the final fading of Sumerian power and the collapse of Akkad, Mesopotamia entered a new, turbulent period characterized by competing city-states and migrating peoples. From this fragmented landscape, a relatively small, obscure city on the Euphrates began its slow, inexorable ascent. This was the rise of Babylon, a city destined for enduring fame, which, under the brilliant leadership of its sixth king, Hammurabi, would transform from a regional power to a mighty empire, unifying Mesopotamia under a single, powerful hand, and establishing a legacy that would resonate for millennia. Imagine the air, no longer thick with the dust of crumbling Sumerian cities, but charged with the energy of new ambition, the scent of fresh mud brick construction, and the subtle tang of a burgeoning empire. The sounds were no longer the lamentations of a dying civilization. They included the rhythmic clang of hammers building new city walls, the murmur of law being proclaimed, and the distant, authoritative tramp of Hammurabi's victorious armies. Moonlight over burgeoning ziggurats and vast palace complexes illuminated a new era of centralized power. Babylon, initially a minor Amorite city-state, strategically located on the Euphrates, was perfectly positioned to capitalize on the chaos that followed the Yud-Tharid collapse. Its early kings slowly expanded its territory, forging alliances and absorbing smaller states. But it was Hammurabi, reigning from around 1792 to 1750 BCE, who transformed Babylon from a regional player into the dominant force in Mesopotamia. Listen to the confident pronouncements of Hammurabi, a ruler of immense skill and ambition, his voice carrying the authority of a divinely appointed king. Hear the disciplined, marching footsteps of his formidable army, their bronze-tipped spears glinting as they systematically conquered rival city-states, Larsa, Mari, Eshnunna, unifying the ancient lands of Sumer and Akkad once more. See the vast plains of Mesopotamia, a patchwork of independent kingdoms, slowly but inexorably falling under the dominion of a single, powerful will, centered on Babylon. Hammurabi was a master statesman and military strategist. He skillfully played rivals against each other, forging alliances only to break them when opportune, always expanding Babylon's sphere of influence. His conquests were relentless, driven by a clear vision of a unified, powerful empire, with Babylon at its undisputed heart. But Hammurabi's genius extended beyond military might. He was also a brilliant administrator and lawmaker. He invested heavily in infrastructure, rebuilding and expanding the intricate network of irrigation canals, ensuring agricultural prosperity. He oversaw extensive building projects in Babylon itself, transforming it into a magnificent capital, adorned with impressive temples and palaces. Most famously, he commissioned his comprehensive legal code, etched onto towering stone steles and displayed in public places throughout his empire. This was the Code of Hammurabi, a profound declaration of universal law that brought order, justice, however harsh, and stability to his vast dominion, establishing a precedent for legal systems for centuries to come. From small town to mighty city under Hammurabi's reign, the rise of Babylon was a profound, revolutionary period in Mesopotamian history, marking the ascent of a new, powerful empire. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mudbrick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex political structures, and establishing Babylon as a name that would echo through history as a byword for power, law, and legendary glory. The Code of Hammurabi. Under the brilliant reign of King Hammurabi, Babylon rose from a regional power to become the undisputed master of Mesopotamia. His conquests unified the diverse lands of Sumer and Akkad, creating a vast empire. But Hammurabi understood that military might alone could not sustain such an expansive dominion. Order, stability, and the perception of justice were equally vital. It was out of this profound need for social cohesion that one of humanity's most monumental legal achievements emerged. The Code of Hammurabi justice carved in stone, a comprehensive law for rulers and peasants alike, profoundly shaping the very fabric of Babylonian society. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of sun-baked clay and the subtle aroma of incense from temple courts, mingled with the murmur of citizens in a bustling marketplace. The sounds were no longer just the authoritative tramp of Hammurabi's armies. They included the low murmur of lawyers debating cases, the rhythmic clang of chisels carving new inscriptions, and the public recitation of legal decrees. Moonlight over towering steles, etched with intricate cuneiform, illuminated a society fundamentally governed by codified law. The code was not merely a collection of edicts. It was a comprehensive legal framework comprising 282 laws covering virtually every aspect of Babylonian life: family law, property law, commercial regulations, criminal justice, and even agricultural practices. It was famously inscribed onto towering basalt steles, monumental stone pillars, which were then erected in prominent public places throughout the empire, allowing all citizens, however illiterate, to understand the principles of justice that governed them. Listen to the rhythmic click of reed styluses as scribes meticulously copied legal precedents onto clay tablets, preserving the intricate details of judgments. Hear the authoritative voice of a judge proclaiming a verdict in a temple court, his words guided by the precise formulations of the code. See the rows of citizens gathering before the towering steles, their faces grimly focused, trying to discern the meaning of the hieroglyphs, understanding that these were the laws that shaped their lives. At its core, the Code of Hammurabi established principles of reciprocity and retribution, famously encapsulated in the phrase, "an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth," lex talionis. However, its application was not entirely equal. It distinguished between social classes, noblemen, commoners, and slaves, often prescribing harsher punishments for offences against those of higher status. Yet it also extended legal protection to the vulnerable, to women, and to slaves, ensuring certain basic rights and preventing arbitrary abuse. The code was a radical departure in legal thought. It was a written law publicly displayed, meaning that justice was not solely dependent on the arbitrary whim of a local ruler or a single judge. It established precedents, clarified expectations, and provided a framework for resolving disputes, bringing a new degree of predictability and order to society. It unified the diverse legal traditions of the various conquered regions under a single imperial standard. Hammurabi presented himself not merely as the author of these laws, but as their divine recipient. The top of the famous stele depicts Hammurabi standing before Shamash, the god of justice, receiving the laws directly from him, thereby imbuing the code with sacred authority and bolstering his own legitimacy as a divinely appointed ruler. Justice carved in stone, a law for rulers and peasants alike. The Code of Hammurabi was a profound revolutionary achievement in human history, establishing a comprehensive written legal system that brought order and stability to a vast empire. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring complex social structures, and laying the foundation for all future legal systems that would seek to define justice and maintain civic order. Temples and ziggurats. In ancient Mesopotamia, a land perpetually shaped by the capricious whims of powerful gods, the divine was not an abstract concept, but an immediate, pervasive reality. At the heart of every city, rising majestically from the flat plains, stood monumental testaments to human devotion and architectural ingenuity, the temples and ziggurats. These were not merely places of worship. They were towering steps of mud brick that literally reached for the heavens, serving as sacred dwellings for the gods. economic powerhouses and profound symbols of a city's spiritual connection to the cosmos. Imagine the air, thick with the sweet, cloying scent of burning incense, the pungent aroma of sacrificial meat, and the murmur of prayers rising from throngs of worshippers. The sounds were no longer just the authoritative pronouncements of kings or the rhythmic click of scribes. They included the solemn chanting of priests, the distant beat of drums during sacred festivals, and the contented hum of thousands of laborers building ever higher structures. Moonlight over towering ziggurats, their summits gleaming under the vast Mesopotamian sky, illuminated a world utterly devoted to its powerful pantheon. The ziggurat, a stepped pyramid-like structure built of mud brick, was the most iconic form of Mesopotamian temple architecture. Unlike the smooth-sided pyramids of Egypt, ziggurats were massive rectangular platforms built in receding tiers, each level adorned with trees and shrubs, creating a hanging garden effect. At its summit stood a small shrine, believed to be the dwelling place of the city's patron deity, a sacred space where heaven and earth met, and priests could commune directly with the gods. Listen to the low, rhythmic chanting of priests, their voices echoing through vast temple halls as they performed elaborate daily rituals to appease these powerful gods. Hear the solemn procession of worshippers, their bare feet slapping softly on the baked earth, bringing offerings of barley, wine, and precious oils to the temple gates. See the colossal structures themselves, their mud brick forms, though often covered in colored glazed tiles, rising dramatically from the flat plain, a constant, visible reminder of divine authority and human ambition. These temples were more than just religious centers. They were the economic and administrative hearts of the city-states. They controlled vast tracts of fertile land, managed the intricate irrigation systems, and oversaw the collection and redistribution of agricultural surplus. Temple scribes meticulously recorded inventories, trade transactions, and legal disputes on clay tablets, making the temple a central hub of literacy and economic activity. Thousands of people, priests, priestesses, scribes, artisans, laborers, farmers, were employed directly by the temple, their lives revolving around its sacred duties and vast resources. The construction of these ziggurats was a monumental undertaking, requiring the collective labor of thousands of people for generations. Millions of mud bricks, painstakingly made from the abundant river clay, were shaped, sun-dried, and then laid by hand. This immense communal effort was itself an act of devotion, a physical manifestation of the city's collective will to honor its gods and ensure their favor. For the ordinary citizen, the ziggurat was a constant, awe-inspiring presence. Its towering height, its intricate terracing, its sacred summit imbued it with an almost palpable sense of divine power. It was a focal point of their spiritual lives, a place of pilgrimage, prayer, and profound reverence. Towering steps of mud brick that reached for the heavens, temples and ziggurats were the spiritual and physical heart of Mesopotamian civilization, profound testaments to human devotion and architectural ambition. They were a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex religious structures, and shaping the very cosmology of forgotten cities, forever reaching for the divine in the vast Mesopotamian sky. Science, stars, and scholars. Beyond the towering ziggurats and the rigid dictates of law codes, the bustling cities of Mesopotamia, particularly Babylon, were also fertile ground for intellectual inquiry. In a world utterly dependent on the cycles of the heavens and the rhythms of the earth, the pursuit of knowledge was not a mere luxury, but a profound necessity. Science stars and scholars intertwined as Babylonian astronomers mapped the cosmos, Physicians sought to heal the body, and the scribes laid the groundwork for the beginnings of mathematics, weaving the first threads of systematic inquiry into the fabric of human memory. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of clay tablets and papyrus scrolls, mingled with the dry, earthy aroma of the desert and the subtle tang of medicinal herbs. The sounds were no longer just the solemn chanting of priests. They included the hushed murmur of scholars in temple observatories, the rhythmic click of scribes meticulously copying astronomical tables, and the low, precise voices of healers diagnosing ailments. Moonlight over ziggurats and vast temple complexes illuminated the painstaking efforts to decipher the secrets of the universe. Babylonian astronomy was unparalleled in the ancient world. Driven by both religious omens and practical needs for calendar keeping and agricultural planning, their scholar priests meticulously observed the night sky for centuries. They charted the movements of stars and planets with astonishing accuracy, developed sophisticated mathematical models to predict eclipses, and identified constellations that still bear Sumerian or Babylonian names today. Their work laid the foundational principles for future Greek and Arab astronomy. Listen to the hushed murmur of astronomers in temple observatories, their eyes fixed on the precise alignment of stars, their hands meticulously marking positions on clay tablets. Hear the rhythmic clicking of reed styluses as scribes painstakingly recorded centuries of celestial observations, building vast archives of astronomical data. See the intricate calculations etched into clay, revealing a deep understanding of planetary cycles and cosmic phenomena. Medicine too saw significant advancements. Babylonian physicians, while still deeply reliant on magic, incantations and divination, such as liver omens, also developed a sophisticated understanding of practical healing. They had extensive lists of medicinal herbs, performed minor surgeries, and developed diagnostic techniques meticulously recording symptoms, diagnoses, and prognoses on clay tablets. They even distinguished between different types of diseases, laying some of the earliest groundwork for rational medical practice. The beginnings of mathematics were another profound Mesopotamian gift. Sumerian scribes, driven by the practical needs of accounting, land surveying, and architectural construction, developed a sophisticated sexagesimal base 60 number system, which we still use today for time, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, and angles, 360 degrees. They developed systems of algebra, geometry, and tables for multiplication, division, squares, and cubes, enabling complex calculations crucial for empire building and trade. Scholarship was a revered profession, centered in the temple schools and palace libraries. Scribes were not just copyists, they were custodians of knowledge, learning a vast repertoire of cuneiform signs, mastering multiple languages, Sumerian and Akkadian, and studying texts on history, law, literature, and the sciences. Their clay tablets, meticulously organized, formed the first true libraries, preserving the collective intellectual heritage. Astronomy, medicine, and the beginnings of mathematics, science, stars, and scholars intertwined in ancient Mesopotamia, laying the foundational intellectual framework for all future civilizations. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the earliest, audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex systems of knowledge, fundamentally reshaping how humanity understood its place in the cosmos and its power to heal, calculate, and comprehend. The power of trade in Mesopotamia, a land rich in fertile soil and human ingenuity, yet notably poor in essential resources like timber, stone, and metals, the imperative of trade was absolute. Long before the grand empires, the river kingdoms understood that their very survival, their prosperity, and their ability to build magnificent cities and ziggurats depended on reaching beyond their immediate borders. The power of trade flowed like the Tigris and Euphrates, its caravans crisscrossing deserts, its boats plying rivers, forging connections, accumulating immense wealth, and weaving a complex web of exchange that defined Mesopotamian civilization. Imagine the air thick with the mingled scents of exotic spices from distant lands, pungent dried fish, precious cedarwood, and the earthy aroma of wool and clay. The sounds were no longer just the murmur of scholars. They included the rhythmic jingle of camel bells, the creak of loaded carts, the shouts of merchants haggling in bustling marketplaces, and the splash of oars in river barges. Moonlight over bustling docks and crowded bazaars illuminated a world driven by the ceaseless flow of goods and wealth. Mesopotamia possessed an abundance of barley, wheat, dates, and highly skilled artisans who produced textiles, pottery, and refined metalwork. But for timber, they relied on distant Lebanon. For copper and tin, they looked to Anatolia and the Iranian plateau. For gold, to Egypt, and for precious stones like lapis lazuli, to Afghanistan. Trade was not a luxury, it was a matter of national security, securing the raw materials essential for weapons, tools, temples, and daily life. Listen to the rhythmic jingle of camel bells as vast caravans laden with Mesopotamian textiles and grain set off across the arid deserts, journeying for weeks or months to distant lands. Hear the shouts of merchants in the bustling port cities along the rivers, haggling over prices, exchanging goods, their voices a symphony of commerce. See the long, narrow riverboats, their sails billowing, laden with cedar logs, copper ingots, or precious stones, slowly making their way up and down the Tigris and Euphrates, the arteries of their trade. Merchants were a vital class, often operating under royal or temple charters, organizing these perilous long-distance expeditions. They were skilled negotiators, multilingual and brave, facing the dangers of bandits, rival empires, and the unforgiving wilderness. Their expertise fueled the economy, bringing in not just raw materials but also luxury goods, exotic perfumes, finely carved ivory, rare pigments that adorned the palaces of kings and the altars of gods. The wealth generated by this extensive trade was immense, allowing Mesopotamia to flourish, to support its vast urban populations, and to fund its monumental building projects. It fostered cultural exchange, bringing new ideas, new technologies, and new forms of art into the river kingdoms, enriching their civilization. The power of trade was such that it often shaped political relationships, leading to alliances or conflicts with other states that controlled vital resources or trade routes. Kings boasted of the exotic goods that flowed into their capitals, a testament to their dominion and their economic prowess. Caravans, rivers, and the wealth of Mesopotamian exchange, the power of trade, was a profound, fundamental force shaping Mesopotamian civilization, connecting it to a wider world and fueling its unparalleled prosperity. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex economic systems, and laying the foundation for all future global commerce and the intricate web of human exchange. The rise of Assyria. Following the eventual decline of Hammurabi's Babylonian Empire, Mesopotamia once again entered a turbulent period of competing powers and shifting hegemonies. From the harsh, mountainous lands of northern Mesopotamia, a new, formidable force slowly began its relentless ascent, destined to forge an empire unlike any seen before. This was the rise of Assyria, a civilization defined by its unparalleled military might and its ruthless efficiency. Warriors of Nineveh and Ashur, driven by a ferocious ambition and an iron will, would forge a brutal, terrifying empire that spanned the Near East, leaving a legacy of conquest and fear etched into the annals of history. Imagine the air, no longer thick with the scent of scholars' clay or temple incense, but heavy with the acrid aroma of iron, sweat, and the pervasive tang of conquest. The sounds were no longer just the murmur of merchants or the rhythmic click of scribes. They included the thunderous tramp of Assyrian legions, the chilling clash of iron weapons, the desperate cries of besieged cities, and the authoritative shouts of fearsome kings. Moonlight over the towering, intimidating walls of Nineveh, its battlements bristling with power, illuminated a world dominated by absolute military might. Assyria, initially a modest city-state around the city of Ashur on the Tigris, had a long and intermittent history of power, but from the 9th century BCE, a series of exceptionally aggressive and capable kings, Ashur-Nisirpal II, Shalmaneser III, Tiglath-Pileser III, Sennacherib, and Ashurbanipal, transformed it into a formidable war machine. Their ambition was total conquest, their method ruthless efficiency. Listen to the disciplined, thunderous march of Assyrian legions, their bronze helmets glinting, their iron weapons clanking rhythmically as they swept across the Near East, crushing all resistance. Hear the chilling shouts of their fearsome commanders, their voices carrying the weight of an empire built on terror. See the elaborate siege engines, marvels of military engineering, slowly lumbering towards the walls of defiant cities, their battering rams poised to strike. The Assyrian army was the most advanced and terrifying military force of its time. They pioneered the widespread use of iron weapons, superior to the bronze arms of their adversaries. They developed sophisticated siege tactics, employing battering rams, movable siege towers, and sappers to undermine city walls. Their cavalry, chariots, and archers were exceptionally well trained and disciplined, capable of coordinated, devastating attacks. But Assyria's power relied as much on psychological warfare as military prowess. They deliberately cultivated an image of unyielding brutality. Conquered peoples who resisted were subjected to horrific punishments, mass deportations, impalement, flaying, and the wholesale destruction of cities. These atrocities, meticulously documented in their own monumental reliefs, were designed to instill terror, to break the will of any potential rebel, turning fear into a tool of rule. The wealth of the Assyrian Empire was immense, fueled by tribute from conquered lands and the vast spoils of war. Its magnificent capital cities, Ashur, Nimrud, Khorsabad, and most famously Nineveh, were adorned with colossal palaces, temples, and towering ziggurats, their walls decorated with elaborate propaganda-laden reliefs depicting their kings' military triumphs and ruthless efficiency. Warriors of Nineveh and Ashur forge a ruthless empire. The rise of Assyria was a profound, revolutionary period in Mesopotamian history, marking the ascent of an unprecedented military superpower that reshaped the entire Near East. It was a slow river of memory flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex political structures, and establishing Assyria as a name that would echo through history as a byword for ruthless conquest and terrifying imperial might. Siege, warfare, and fear. The Assyrian Empire, forged by ruthless warriors and an insatiable hunger for conquest, became the undisputed master of the Near East. But its dominion was not merely established by open battle, it was cemented through a terrifying, systematic mastery of siege warfare. For a defiant city facing the Assyrian army at its gates was to confront pure terror. Iron weapons, battering rams, and towering siege engines were deployed with brutal efficiency, transforming every siege into a psychological war where fear itself became a tool of rule, breaking the will of the besieged long before the walls were breached. Imagine the air thick with the acrid scent of burning timber, the metallic tang of iron, and the pervasive stench of unburied dead. The sounds were no longer just the distant tramp of Assyrian legions. They included the relentless thud of battering rams against city gates, the whizzing whistle of slingshots, the chilling shouts of Assyrian soldiers, and the desperate cries of the besieged populace. Moonlight over towering siege towers and crumbling city walls illuminated a world locked in a brutal, terrifying confrontation. The Assyrians were unmatched in their siegecraft, innovating and refining tactics that made even the most formidable city walls vulnerable. They systematically surrounded cities, cutting off food and water supplies, knowing that hunger and thirst were powerful allies. They built massive earthen ramps, siege ramps, to allow their siege engines to reach the top of city walls, or they employed sappers to undermine foundations, causing sections of walls to collapse. Listen to the rhythmic, bone-jarring thud of the battering rams, huge wooden beams often capped with iron, swinging relentlessly against gates or weak points in the walls, their blows echoing with terrifying finality. Hear the whizzing sound of thousands of slingshot projectiles and arrows raining down on the defenders, disrupting their efforts. See the colossal siege towers, wooden castles on wheels, slowly lumbering towards the city walls, bristling with archers and spearmen, a terrifying symbol of inevitable conquest. But the Assyrians' most potent weapon was fear itself. They deliberately cultivated an image of unyielding brutality. Before, during, and after a siege, they would commit horrifying atrocities, meticulously documenting them in their monumental palace reliefs. Mass deportations, impalement, flaying, and the wholesale destruction of resisting cities were not just acts of war, they were acts of propaganda designed to break the will of any potential rebel, to force surrender through sheer terror. The psychological impact on the besieged populace was immense. Trapped within their walls, watching their food and water dwindle, listening to the relentless assault, seeing the brutal efficiency of the Assyrian war machine, hope would slowly wither. The knowledge of the atrocities committed against other resisting cities would haunt their minds, making the prospect of surrender, however bitter, seem preferable to the certainty of a more horrific fate. The stench of death, of disease, of the prolonged suffering would permeate the air within the besieged city. Disease, brought by overcrowding and poor sanitation, would often do as much damage as the siege engines themselves. The screams of the wounded, the cries of the starving children, the prayers of the desperate priests. These were the sounds of a city slowly dying, its spirit being broken. Iron weapons, battering rams, and terror as a tool of rule. Siege warfare and fear were the defining characteristics of Assyrian conquest, transforming every confrontation into a psychological battle where the will to resist was systematically eroded. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mudbrick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex political structures, and establishing Assyria as a name that would echo through history as a byword for ruthless conquest and the terrifying mastery of fear. The library of Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian Empire, forged through unparalleled military might and sustained by a calculated terror, was famed for its brutal efficiency and its insatiable hunger for conquest. Yet, paradoxically, within the heart of this fearsome empire, a different, more profound ambition also flourished: the pursuit and preservation of knowledge. At Nineveh, its magnificent capital, King Ashurbanipal, one of Assyria's last great rulers, built a monument to intellect that would defy the ravages of time. The library of Ashurbanipal, a vast collection of clay tablets, was gathered not for fleeting glory, but to preserve the memory of worlds, an astonishing intellectual legacy that captured the very essence of Mesopotamian civilization. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of sun-baked clay, mingled with the dry, earthy aroma of papyrus and the subtle tang of human presence. The sounds were no longer the clash of iron weapons or the shouts of besieging armies. They included the hushed murmur of scribes meticulously copying ancient texts, the soft rustle of countless drying tablets, and the distant rhythmic tap of chisels carving inscriptions. Moonlight over the vast palace complexes of Nineveh illuminated a silent, scholarly pursuit, a profound counterpoint to the empire's martial prowess. Ashurbanipal, reigning from 668 to 627 BCE, was a unique Assyrian king. While a formidable warrior and a ruthless administrator, he was also a highly educated and deeply cultured monarch, famously boasting that he could read and write, a rare skill for a ruler of his time. His passion for knowledge was insatiable, driving him to amass the greatest library of the ancient world. Listen to the rhythmic click of reed styluses as scribes painstakingly pressed cuneiform into wet clay, copying texts from across the empire, from Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon. Hear the low murmur of scholars classifying tablets, organizing them by subject: history, law, divination, medicine, astronomy, epic poetry. See the hundreds of thousands of clay tablets meticulously catalogued and stored in specialized rooms within Ashurbanipal's palace at Nineveh, each one a fragment of recorded human knowledge. The library was a systematic collection, assembled through two main methods. Ashurbanipal's scribes were sent to copy texts from ancient temple libraries and scholarly collections throughout his vast empire. But also, as his armies conquered cities, scribes would carefully gather and seize tablets from vanquished lands, bringing them back to Nineveh to be copied and added to the royal collection. This was a conquest of knowledge as much as territory. The scope of the library was astonishingly comprehensive. It contained copies of epic poems like the Epic of Gilgamesh, ancient Sumerian myths, dictionaries and lexical lists essential for understanding older languages, astronomical observations and predictions, medical texts detailing diagnoses and remedies, religious rituals, omens, historical annals, and royal decrees. It was a repository of the entire intellectual heritage of Mesopotamia, a deliberate act of cultural preservation. This deliberate act of gathering and preserving the memory of worlds stands in stark contrast to Assyria's fearsome reputation for destruction. It reveals a hidden, intellectual side to the brutal empire, a recognition of the profound value of knowledge and the enduring power of the written word. Clay tablets gathered to preserve the memory of worlds. The library of Ashurbanipal was a profound, revolutionary achievement in human history, a testament to the enduring power of knowledge and the ambition to preserve the entire intellectual heritage of a civilization. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mudbrick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex systems of knowledge, and ensuring that the stories, laws, and wisdom of Mesopotamia would endure for millennia, waiting for a distant rediscovery, even long after its mighty empire had turned to dust. The fall of Nineveh. The Assyrian Empire, forged by ruthless warriors and sustained by a reign of terror, had dominated the Near East for centuries. Its magnificent capital, Nineveh, a seemingly invincible symbol of its power. But even the mightiest empires are destined to fall. The very brutality that had secured Assyrian dominion also sowed the seeds of its destruction, creating a vast array of vengeful enemies. The fall of Nineveh was a cataclysmic event. Coalitions of Babylonians and Medes struck, and the great city, after a brutal siege, burned in 612 BCE, marking the dramatic collapse of the terrifying Assyrian Empire and reshaping the political landscape of the ancient world. The fall of Nineveh. Imagine the air, thick with the acrid stench of burning timber, melting mud brick, and the suffocating smoke of a city in its death throes. The sounds were no longer the disciplined tramp of Assyrian legions or the hushed murmur of scholars. They were the terrifying shouts of victorious besiegers, the desperate screams of a collapsing populace, the crackle and roar of an unstoppable inferno, and the desperate cries of those fighting for their lives amidst utter chaos. Moonlight, falling on broken amphitheatres, illuminated a city in flames, its proud walls breached, its glory consumed by fire. The roots of Assyria's downfall lay in its own policies, its brutal conquests, its mass deportations, and its relentless demands for tribute created a vast empire brimming with resentment and a fierce desire for liberation. When Assyria began to show signs of internal weakness, succession crises, overextended borders, and continuous warfare, its enemies seized their opportunity. Listen to the thunderous roar of the besieging armies, a coalition of Babylonians under Nabopolassar and Medes under Cyaxares, their combined might overwhelming the once unconquerable Assyrian defences. Hear the desperate, futile shouts of the Assyrian defenders, weakened by prolonged fighting and internal strife, their voices swallowed by the overwhelming assault. See the towering walls of Nineveh, once believed impregnable, slowly crumbling under relentless battering rams and the sheer weight of attacking forces. The siege of Nineveh was long and brutal, a desperate last stand for the mighty Assyrian Empire. But the combined forces of its enemies proved too strong, their determination fueled by generations of Assyrian oppression. The Tigris River, sometimes a defender, also contributed to the city's demise, as a flood breached its outer walls, allowing the attackers to pour in. For days, the city was subjected to a horrific sacking. Palaces, temples, and homes were looted, destroyed, and put to the torch. The vast treasures accumulated over centuries of conquest were plundered. The magnificent reliefs depicting Assyrian triumphs were defaced, shattered, or consumed by fire. The library of Ashurbanipal, though built to last, suffered immense damage, its clay tablets baked even harder by the conflagration, ironically preserving some of them for future rediscovery. The destruction of Nineveh was absolute, a deliberate act of vengeance by its enemies. The once proud capital, a symbol of terror and power, was reduced to a smoking ruin, its grandeur swiftly erased from the landscape. The psychological impact across the Near East was immense. The invincible Assyrian Empire, a source of fear for centuries, had finally fallen, and its collapse sent shockwaves through the entire region, ushering in a new political order. Coalitions strike and the great city burns in 612 BCE. The fall of Nineveh was a cataclysmic, epoch-defining event, marking the dramatic collapse of a terrifying empire and the end of an era of Assyrian dominance. It was a slow river of memory flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring narratives and leaving behind a haunting echo of forgotten cities consumed by fire and vengeance. Babylon's return. The cataclysmic fall of Nineveh in 612 BCE marked the brutal end of the fearsome Assyrian Empire, plunging Mesopotamia into a new power vacuum. But from the ashes of Assyrian dominance, a familiar name rose once more, reclaiming its ancient glory. This was Babylon's return, a spectacular resurgence under the Neo-Babylonian Empire, particularly under the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II. This was an era of unprecedented grandeur marked by the legendary Hanging Gardens and a desperate, ambitious dream of glory that sought to surpass all previous empires, creating a city of unparalleled magnificence. Imagine the air, thick, not with the stench of burning ruins, but with the rich, exotic aromas of vast gardens, the sweet perfume of imported cedar wood, and the bustling clamour of a rebuilt, resplendent metropolis. The sounds were no longer the shouts of conquering armies. They included the rhythmic clang of hammers building colossal new walls, the murmur of thriving markets, and the majestic chants of priests in newly dedicated temples. Moonlight over towering ziggurats and the fabled hanging gardens illuminated a city reborn, dazzling and powerful. Nabopolassar, the founder of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, had led the coalition that destroyed Assyria. His son, Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned from 605 to 562 BCE, inherited a vast empire and embarked on a monumental building program to transform Babylon into the most magnificent city of the ancient world. His ambition was to restore Babylon to its ancient glory, surpassing even the legends of Hammurabi. Listen to the confident pronouncements of Nebuchadnezzar II, a powerful and skilled ruler, his voice carrying the authority of a divinely appointed king. Hear the joyous celebrations of citizens in a rebuilt, thriving Babylon, their city once again the undisputed center of the world. See the vast Euphrates River flowing through the heart of the city, its banks lined with bustling docks, its waters reflecting the dazzling new architecture. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon was a wonder to behold. He constructed massive double walls around the city, so thick that chariots could race upon them, making Babylon virtually impregnable. The famous Ishtar Gate, adorned with brilliant blue glazed bricks depicting lions, dragons, and bulls, was an awe-inspiring entrance, leading to a processional way lined with similar artwork. At the heart of the city rose the Etemenanki, the colossal ziggurat dedicated to Marduk, Babylon's patron god. Often cited as the inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel, it was a massive stepped pyramid of mud brick, its summit reaching for the heavens, a testament to divine power and human ambition. His palace, the Southern Palace, was a sprawling complex of courtyards and lavish apartments, adorned with brilliant glazed brickwork. But the most legendary of Nebuchadnezzar's creations were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though their exact location and even existence are debated by modern archaeologists, ancient accounts describe multi-tiered terraces filled with exotic plants and trees, irrigated by a complex system of pumps and water wheels, rising majestically from the flat Mesopotamian plain, a verdant marvel in the arid landscape, a gift for his Median wife. Nebuchadnezzar's military campaigns were also extensive. He expanded the empire's borders, most famously conquering the kingdom of Judah and destroying Jerusalem, leading to the Babylonian captivity of the Jews, an event that profoundly shaped biblical history. The Hanging Gardens and Dreams of Glory. Babylon's return under Nebuchadnezzar II was a profound, glorious resurgence, transforming the fragmented political landscape of the Near East and creating a city of unparalleled magnificence. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the earliest, audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex political structures, and establishing Babylon as a name that would echo through history as a byword for power, law, and legendary dazzling glory. Persia's conquest. The Neo-Babylonian Empire, rebuilt to unparalleled splendor under Nebuchadnezzar II, its magnificent walls towering, its hanging gardens a wonder of the world, seemed destined for eternal glory. Yet, even this mightiest of Mesopotamian kingdoms was ultimately mortal. To the east, a new, formidable power was rising, Persia, under the visionary leadership of Cyrus the Great. Persia's conquest was swift and decisive, absorbing Babylon into a larger, more expansive empire, marking the final end of independent Mesopotamian rule and ushering in a new era that would forever redefine the political landscape of the ancient world. Imagine the air, thick, not with the clamour of Babylonian construction, but with the dust of distant Persian armies, the scent of horse sweat, and the subtle tang of inevitability. The sounds were no longer the majestic chants of Marduk's priests or the hum of bustling markets. They included the rhythmic march of Persian legions, the confident pronouncements of a new king, and the ominous silence of a city awaiting its fate. Moonlight over the once impregnable walls of Babylon, now standing testament to the fleeting nature of even the grandest empires, illuminated a moment of profound transition. Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, was a military genius and a shrewd statesman. He had systematically conquered the powerful Median Empire, then the wealthy kingdom of Lydia, building a vast dominion that stretched from the Aegean Sea to Central Asia. Babylon, isolated and weakened by internal discord and the growing power of Persia, stood as the last great independent power in the Near East. Listen to the confident pronouncements of Cyrus's heralds, offering peace and order to those who surrendered, promising harsh retribution for those who resisted. Hear the nervous whispers within Babylon's walls as its citizens contemplated their fate, knowing the immense power arrayed against them. See the vast Persian army, meticulously organized and disciplined, arrayed before Babylon's colossal fortifications, a seemingly irresistible force. The conquest of Babylon in 539 BCE was remarkably swift and, according to traditional accounts, achieved with minimal bloodshed. The Bible and Greek historian Herodotus describes Cyrus diverting the Euphrates River, allowing his troops to march through the dried riverbed directly into the heart of the city, bypassing its formidable walls. Whether through cunning siegecraft or through an internal uprising by dissatisfied factions within Babylon, the city fell. The Persian conquest was not a brutal sacking in the Assyrian style. Cyrus famously pursued a policy of religious tolerance and respect for local customs. He allowed the Jewish exiles held captive in Babylon since Nebuchadnezzar's conquests to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, earning him a revered place in biblical texts. He presented himself as a liberator, not a conqueror, bringing peace and order. Babylon, though it lost its independence, continued to be an important provincial capital within the vast Persian Empire. Its administrative structures, its advanced astronomy, and its rich cultural heritage were largely preserved and incorporated into the larger Persian system. Its towering ziggurats and magnificent palaces continued to stand, symbols now of a broader imperial power. Cyrus the Great absorbs Babylon into a larger empire. Persia's conquest was a profound revolutionary event, marking the final end of independent Mesopotamian rule and integrating the ancient river kingdoms into a new, globalized imperial structure. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mudbrick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex political structures, and establishing Persia as the dominant power whose shadow would extend across continents, profoundly reshaping the future of the ancient world. Alexander and the Greeks. The Persian Empire, established by Cyrus the Great, had absorbed Mesopotamia, ushering in a long period of foreign rule for the ancient riverlands. For 2 centuries, Babylon and its surrounding territories were vital but subordinate provinces within this vast dominion. But then, from the distant, rugged north, a new incandescent star rose, destined to shatter the Persian Imperium and briefly bring a new Hellenistic light to the ancient world. This was the era of Alexander and the Greeks, where the Macedonian king walked Babylon's streets, dreaming of a unified empire, a fusion of East and West, leaving a profound, indelible mark on the memory of forgotten cities. Imagine the air, thick, not with the subtle aromas of Persian administration, but with the sharp scent of Macedonian steel, Greek philosophy and the exotic perfumes of a newly conquered world. The sounds were no longer just the murmur of Persian governors. They included the disciplined tramp of Alexander's phalanxes, the joyous shouts of a conquering army, and the measured debates of Greek philosophers accompanying the king. Moonlight over towering ziggurats and vast palace complexes illuminated a moment of profound cultural collision. Alexander the Great, King of Macedon, embarked on his legendary conquest of the Persian Empire in 334 BCE, a campaign of astonishing speed and military genius. His victories at Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela utterly crushed the Persian army, toppling an empire that had spanned centuries. Babylon, a key Persian capital, opened its gates to him in 331 BCE, welcoming him as a liberator. Listen to the triumphant shouts of Alexander's soldiers, their heavy Macedonian boots clattering on Babylon's sacred processional way. Hear the murmur of awe from the Babylonian populace, witnessing the arrival of this young, charismatic, and seemingly invincible conqueror. See Alexander himself, a figure of compelling charisma and immense ambition, walking through Babylon's magnificent streets, gazing upon its towering ziggurats and legendary hanging gardens, a Western king in the heart of the ancient East. Alexander was profoundly fascinated by Babylon. He admired its history, its culture, and its strategic importance. He ordered the rebuilding of temples, showing respect for local traditions, and conceived of making Babylon the capital of his vast, new, Hellenistic empire, a vision of a unified world blending Greek culture with the ancient traditions of the East. He dreamt of a city where Greek and Babylonian scholars, administrators, and soldiers would live side by side, forging a new imperial identity. He established Greek administrative practices, founded new cities, often named Alexandria, and introduced Hellenistic culture and language throughout the conquered territories. Greek became the new lingua franca of governance and elite culture, blending with the ancient Aramaic and Akkadian. This was a profound cultural fusion, an attempt to bridge the vast divides between East and West. Tragically, Alexander's grand vision for Babylon and his empire was cut short. He died in Nebuchadnezzar's palace in Babylon in 323 BCE at the age of 32, his dreams of further conquest and a unified world left unfulfilled. His sudden death plunged his vast empire into a bitter struggle among his generals, the Diadochi, leading to its fragmentation into several Hellenistic kingdoms, such as the Seleucid Empire, which would rule Mesopotamia for centuries. The Macedonian king walks Babylon's streets dreaming of empire. Alexander and the Greeks marked a profound transformative period in Mesopotamian history, integrating the ancient riverlands into the wider Hellenistic world. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mudbrick, charting the earliest audacious sparks of human memory in the creation of enduring, complex narratives, and leaving a profound, indelible mark on the memory of forgotten cities, forever connecting their ancient past with the vibrant new Hellenistic age. Forgotten cities in the sand. The great empires came and went: Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Persian, Greek, and eventually Roman. Each left its indelible mark on Mesopotamia, building magnificent cities, forging laws, creating art, and pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. But as the centuries stretched into millennia and the political centers of power shifted elsewhere, the ancient heart of Mesopotamia slowly, inexorably began to recede. Ur and Uruk, once the proud, bustling cradles of civilization, crumbled, their towering ziggurats and mighty walls gradually buried beneath centuries of silence, wind-blown sand, and the relentless, patient reclamation of the desert. Imagine the air, no longer thick with the clamor of urban life, but with the profound, dry silence of the desert, broken only by the whisper of the wind over unseen mounds. The sounds are now those of vast, empty spaces, the rustle of reeds in distant, dwindling marshes, and the mournful cry of desert birds. Moonlight, falling on undulating dunes, illuminates a landscape where entire cities have vanished, swallowed by the earth, existing only as faint contours beneath the shifting sand. The reasons for this profound disappearance were manifold. Climate change, leading to increased aridity and desertification, slowly made the once fertile lands harder to cultivate. Centuries of intensive irrigation without proper drainage led to the salinization of the soil, rendering vast tracts infertile. The capricious floods of the Tigris and Euphrates, no longer meticulously controlled by complex canal systems, either brought devastating destruction or failed to provide sufficient water. Listen to the profound, almost haunting silence of the desert night, broken only by the whisper of the wind, carrying fine grains of sand across the unseen ruins. Hear the distant bleating of hardy desert goats, their small hooves treading unknowingly over the forgotten streets of ancient kings. See the vast, empty plains, once teeming with life, now a desolate expanse, their contours subtly altered by the buried ghosts of cities. As populations dwindled and power shifted to new centers, to Babylon under its various guises, to Nineveh, to Persepolis, to Antioch, the maintenance of the older Sumerian cities became unsustainable. Their intricate irrigation systems, requiring immense communal labor, fell into disrepair. Their massive mud brick structures, perpetually vulnerable to erosion and the elements, slowly began to crumble, melting back into the earth from which they came. Ur and Uruk, once home to tens of thousands, became ghost towns, then abandoned mounds. Their towering ziggurats, once reaching for the heavens, slowly sank, their lower tiers buried by accumulating sand and silt, their upper levels weathering into indistinct hillocks. The bustling marketplaces, the grand temple courts, the narrow residential streets, all disappeared beneath the relentless march of time and nature. For centuries, these cities lay forgotten, their names preserved only in cryptic ancient texts, their locations lost to human memory. The knowledge of their existence faded, replaced by local legends of ancient mounds or haunted places. The very language that had given them voice, Sumerian, then Akkadian, became dead languages, understood by few, locked away on unreadable clay tablets. Ur and Uruk crumble, buried beneath centuries of silence. Forgotten cities in the sand were a profound, tragic reality of Mesopotamia's long history, a poignant testament to the transient nature of even the most groundbreaking civilizations. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates weaving together, myth and mud brick, charting the gradual retreat of humanity from its earliest urban experiments, leaving behind only the haunting echo of forgotten grandeur, waiting for a distant, improbable rediscovery of Mesopotamia. For nearly 2 millennia, the magnificent cities of Mesopotamia, the very cradles of civilization, lay buried beneath the shifting sands of time, their names often preserved only in biblical narratives or obscure classical texts. Ur, Uruk, Nineveh, Babylon. These names resonated as myth and legend, but their physical locations were lost, their languages unreadable. Then, in a new age of inquiry and adventure, driven by intrepid explorers and tenacious scholars, the era of rediscovery of Mesopotamia began. Spades lifted the dust from cuneiform, revealing an entire lost world, and breathing life back into the echoes of forgotten cities, forever altering humanity's understanding of its own origins. Imagine the air, thick not with the dust of ancient empires, but with the dry scent of archaeological excavation, the whisper of dry earth, and the nervous excitement of a groundbreaking discovery. The sounds are no longer those of bustling cities or silent ruins. They are the rhythmic scrape of shovels, the careful brush of archaeologists' tools, the hushed exclamations of discovery, and the triumphant decipherment of ancient languages. Moonlight, falling on newly exposed ziggurats and palace walls, illuminates a world slowly re-emerging from oblivion. The 19th century marked the beginning of this momentous rediscovery. European adventurers, diplomats, and scholars, inspired by biblical accounts and classical references, began to explore the vast, enigmatic mounds, tells, that dotted the plains of Iraq. Figures like Austin Henry Layard, Paul Emile Botta, and Robert Coldaway embarked on ambitious excavations, often in challenging conditions, battling heat, disease, and local resistance. Listen to the rhythmic scrape of shovels against the earth, slowly uncovering the brickwork of ancient walls, the foundations of long-lost temples. Hear the hushed exclamations as a statue emerges from the dirt, a relief carving or, most profoundly, a clay tablet covered in strange wedge-shaped markings. See the vast archaeological sites, once indistinguishable mounds, now revealing the outlines of monumental cities, their forgotten grandeur slowly returning to the light. The true breakthrough came with the decipherment of cuneiform. Scholars like Henry Rawlinson, working painstakingly on the Behistun inscription, a multilingual text carved into a cliff face, slowly cracked the code of the ancient writing system. This was a monumental intellectual achievement, akin to the decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphs, which unlocked an entire library of ancient knowledge. Suddenly, the clay tablets, once unreadable curiosities, became eloquent voices from the distant past. The recovered tablets revealed astonishing insights into Mesopotamian life, their laws, their myths, their daily transactions, their scientific observations, their prayers, their letters. The Epic of Gilgamesh, long thought to be lost or merely a fragment, was rediscovered, its timeless tale of human mortality resonating across millennia. Libraries, like that of Ashurbanipal, were unearthed, providing an unparalleled window into the intellectual heritage of the world's first civilizations. This rediscovery revolutionized human history. It pushed back the known timeline of civilization by thousands of years, revealing complex, sophisticated societies that predated ancient Greece and Rome. It demonstrated that humanity's first steps towards writing, law, mathematics, and urban living originated in the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates. Scholars, explorers, and spades lift the dust from cuneiform. The rediscovery of Mesopotamia was a profound, transformative period, breathing life back into forgotten cities and their ancient peoples. It was a slow river of memory, flowing like the Tigris and Euphrates, weaving together myth and mud brick, charting the powerful, enduring human drive to unearth its own origins, and fundamentally altering our understanding of the complete, legendary history of civilization, forever connecting us to the ancient whispers from the cradle of humanity. The cradle that endures. The empires of Mesopotamia, from Sumer to Akkad, Babylon to Assyria, rose and fell, their magnificent cities eventually buried beneath the sands of time. Yet the story of Mesopotamia is not one of mere disappearance, but of profound, enduring influence. For it was in this fertile crescent, cradled by the Tigris and Euphrates, that humanity first dared to dream of settled life, of cities, of writing, of law. The cradle that endures is a testament to how Mesopotamia's gifts, its writing, its laws, its myths, still shape us today, a constant, subtle echo in the foundations of our modern world, a quiet, flowing river of memory that continues to define human civilization. Imagine the air, not with the dust of ancient ruins, but with the generalized aroma of history, of memory, of a past that continues to shape the present. The sounds are no longer just the clamour of ancient markets. They are the rhythmic click of modern keyboards, the measured tones of legal arguments, and the whispered telling of timeless stories, all infused with the invisible legacy of Mesopotamia. Moonlight, falling on newly discovered cuneiform tablets, illuminates not just the past, but the enduring source of our shared human story. The most profound gift of Mesopotamia was writing. Cuneiform, scratched onto clay tablets, was the very first sustained attempt to capture human thought, record history, and codify law. Without this invention, the complexities of urban civilization would have been impossible. Its legacy lives on in every word we read, every document we write, every piece of information we record. It is the fundamental technology that underpins all subsequent human knowledge. Listen to the enduring echoes of Mesopotamian law in our modern legal systems. The Code of Hammurabi, with its principles of justice, its distinction between civil and criminal offences, its emphasis on written contracts, laid the foundational groundwork for legal thought. Its impact, though indirect, can be felt in the very structure of our contemporary legal frameworks. Hear the subtle resonance of Mesopotamian myths in later cultures and religions. The Epic of Gilgamesh, with its themes of friendship, mortality, and the Great Flood, finds echoes in biblical narratives and other ancient tales, the stories of powerful gods, of humanity's subservience to divine will, of the constant struggle between order and chaos. These ancient motifs continue to inspire literature, art, and spiritual thought. The foundations of mathematics and astronomy, meticulously developed by Babylonian scholars for practical and religious purposes, continue to influence our understanding of the universe. Our division of the circle into 360 degrees, of the hour into 60 minutes, and the minute into 60 seconds, these are direct inheritances from Mesopotamia's sexagesimal system. Their accurate charting of celestial bodies laid the groundwork for future scientific inquiry. The concept of the city itself, of complex urban living, originated in Mesopotamia. Uruk, Ur, Babylon. These were the prototypes for all future cities, demonstrating how thousands of people could live, work, and organize themselves within a structured, complex society. Their architectural innovations, their administrative systems, their social hierarchies, these were the first grand experiments in human civilization. How Mesopotamia's gifts, writing, law, myth, still shape us today. The cradle that endures is more than just a historical fact. It is a living, breathing concept, a profound testament to the unparalleled, enduring influence of a civilization that, despite its eventual disappearance,